Right this moment, if you go to a missing persons database, I'm going to use the DOE network as my example. You choose the United States as your geographical location, choose male, and scroll down to Florida, you will see that the first child on there is a little boy named Jonathan Hagans. His disappearance is the longest running case of a missing child out of the state of Florida, and still to this day, his loved ones are searching for answers. I am eager to get into this case, but before we do, a quick word from today's sponsor, which is ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. From primary care to dentistry, eye care, skincare, and nearly everything in between. ZocDoc makes it easy to book in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers. With ZocDoc, you can filter for doctors by insurance, location, and specialties, and you can see reviews by verified patients so you can choose the best, most convenient care for you. I have struggled with my health since I was about 17 years old, so when I moved to a new city about 3 years ago, I found myself most anxious about one thing, and that was finding doctors that I could rely on. I was starting from scratch and I was quite stressed out at the time, but I did turn to ZocDoc, and I actually found my current primary care physician through the site. He is honestly the first doctor that I've ever gone to where I felt like I was really listened to, and he didn't make me feel like I had to rush through everything that I was saying. And at one point, he looked at me and he said, I've been through similar, and we are going to find out what's going on with your health. I left that appointment feeling better than I've ever felt leaving any doctor's appointment, and without ZocDoc, I don't think I would have ever come across him. ZocDoc also helps you get appointments fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can score same-day appointments. No need to call doctor's offices and wait on hold either. ZocDoc lets you do everything online, which I love. Your health deserves attention. Stop putting off those much needed appointments and visit ZocDoc.com/gabulosis to easily find and book a trusted doctor today. You can also click the link in the description of this video. Thank you, ZocDoc, for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the usual program. This is the unsolved disappearance of Jonathan Hagans. Jonathan Edward Hagans, affectionately known as Jon Jon, was born to parents Joseph and Margene Hagans on May 3rd of 1965. He grew up surrounded by the warmth and support of a large and loving family. ABC News Jacksonville spoke with Jon Jon's older brother, Joe Hagans III, in August of 2024 when he recounted the day that forever changed the course of his family's lives. The date was Tuesday, June 11th of 1968. Joe, who was just 5 years old at the time, recalls being at a small snack bar near the beach access at 16th Avenue South. He was there with his older sister Susan, one of her friends, and 3-year-old Jon Jon, along with their parents, aunt, and uncle. While the adults gathered inside by a window at the snack bar, the children spent their time outside near the top of a ramp that led down to the beach, enjoying the carefree moments of a beautiful sunny day. The adults were inside, but through the window they were able to keep an eye on the children playing. Jon Jon, though, at one point told his older brother that he wanted to go back inside of the restaurant to be with the adults. Joe Hagans said, "I watched him walk back to the door. There was a little door on the side, almost like a little screen door type thing. He reached up and opened the door, and I turned around facing back toward the ocean." About 5 or 10 minutes later, Joe remembers his father stepping outside and asking everyone where Jon Jon had gone. The children answered that he should be inside the restaurant. But the moment those words left their mouths, Joe noticed a sudden shift in his father's expression. That was when he first saw the rising panic, an unmistakable fear that something was terribly wrong. Mr. Hagans rushed back inside to tell his wife that their son was missing, and she immediately broke down in worry and disbelief. The family quickly began searching the surrounding area, calling his name, and checking every spot they thought he might have wandered to, but there was no sign of him anywhere. Realizing the gravity of the situation, they notified the Jacksonville Beach Police Department of Jon Jon's disappearance, and officers came out to the scene immediately and began their own urgent search. Lifeguards were quickly dispatched to the area, combing the shoreline and scanning the water for any sign of the missing child. The urgency of the situation grew so great that even the Navy joined the effect, deploying a helicopter to sweep the beach and ocean from above. Despite these extensive search efforts, not a single trace of Jon Jon was found. Search efforts continued tirelessly for 5 days, hoping that they would find any clues as to what happened to Jon Jon. Yet, despite the intensive operation, no body was ever recovered. Although authorities told the family that Jon Jon had most likely likely drowned, Joe Hagans says his parents never accepted that explanation. They believed that someone, a person, had taken their son, not the ocean. Jon Jon's younger brother Joel stated that there were several people that said that they saw Jon Jon make his way to the snack bar, but not a single person ever said they saw him head back in the direction of the water. Not one. Their sister Susan was said to be closer toward the water, and she never saw Jon Jon come back to the beach. There also wasn't anyone who came forward claiming they saw Jon Jon leaving the snack bar with any adults that most definitely weren't his parents or uncle or aunt. It was like he seemingly vanished into thin air. About the disappearance, Lieutenant Z.V. Smallwood, District Commander of the Florida Law Enforcement Bureau, said, "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I don't think the wildest detective writer could dream this up." According to online sources, Jon Jon's mother, Margene, believed that possibly he could have been taken by some adults that had been standing outside the snack bar. She stated that she saw a woman and two men outside of the snack bar. One of the men at one point bent down, then all three left. This was something that she just saw through the window, and she didn't think anything of it until her son went missing. No police sketches of these individuals have ever been produced, so I'm going to assume that Margene did not get a very good look at these people. Officials and loved ones continued searching for days. The first real lead in this case didn't surface until 8 days after Jon Jon was last seen. This is when a wheelchair, an ice chest, and a child's tricycle were found floating in the St. Johns River. Authorities asked the public to call if they knew who these items belonged to. A man named John Gilbert phoned authorities and said that he was sure he knew who the wheelchair belonged to, and said that he'd come down to the department that night to properly identify it. Well, a few hours later, John and his wife were on their way to the station to see the wheelchair in person, and both of them were killed in a car accident. Police were not giving up a lot of information at this time because, of course, they didn't want to jeopardize the case, but they were keeping the public updated and being strategic when it came to what they were releasing. At this time, they let it be known that based on witness sightings, they believed the wheelchair had belonged to an unidentified blonde woman between 25 to 35 years old who had been using the wheelchair. They stated that she had been seen driving a faded white 1960 Ford and was said to be from Michigan. She was allegedly spotted with a little girl about 4 years old and a little boy who resembled Jon Jon. Lieutenant Smallwood stated that based on witness reports, John Gilbert and a woman resembling this unidentified blonde woman had been seen with Jon Jon together. They couldn't question John Gilbert anymore because, of course, he died in the car accident, but they thought that he possibly knew more. Police claimed that they had reliable reports of people claiming they saw this woman with the missing boy. They believed the boy was still alive due to this. One report I found highlighted this and described the woman as being roughly 30 years old with dark blonde hair that had been worn in a ponytail, and that she was last seen driving her Ford south of Jacksonville. I personally reviewed numerous newspaper reports and online articles, and as far as I could tell, this woman has never been found. Over the years, Jonathan Hagans' case gradually went cold, fading from public attention. The case, though, of course, never left the minds of his loved ones, and for years, they held on to hope that they might hear something, anything about what had actually happened to Jon Jon. Holidays came and went, birthdays passed, and the rest of the Hagans children grew up. Yet Jon Jon was never forgotten. Deep down, his family always believed he hadn't simply drowned, but had been taken by someone, and that somehow he was still out there, alive somewhere. Years would pass before there were any real updates in this case again. In 1989, Sergeant Mike Deals, an Altamont Springs police sketch artist, had created an artist workshop to train police sketch artists so they could update photos of missing children. Dozens of sketch artists at Florida police agencies worked on creating age progression sketches of these children, and Jon Jon was one of them. Jon Jon's age progression photo of what he would have looked like at roughly 23 years old was finished in February of 1989, and when his mother saw it, she began to cry. It was surreal for her to see what her missing son could have possibly looked like at a time when they believed he was still out there. She even said at this time that she did not feel in her heart that he was dead. The updated photo was used by looking at different photos of the rest of Jon Jon's family and going off of their features. His mother hoped that with this photo, they would be able to locate him after 2 decades. Not long after this photo was released to the public, a man came forward in April of 1989 claiming that he thought he could be Jon Jon. This man's name was David Bonnabel, and he was from Buffalo, New York. This man stated that he was kidnapped as a child and had been held captive for over 10 years in the Louisiana bayou by an older woman. He even told authorities and the Hagans family that he remembered being kidnapped at about 3 years old on a beach by this woman. On April 29th of 1989, David actually flew to Tallahassee and met Margene at the Tallahassee airport. When she saw him in person, she instinctively examined his face to see if this could possibly be her missing son. She told the papers, "I looked at him hard. I wanted it to be him. I wanted it to be Jonathan, but I didn't want to make it be Jonathan. I just wanted to see something that made me know." Margene said that his eyes looked right, but they were not particularly unusual or unique, that the nose looked like a Hagans nose, but a lot of people might have that same nose. His hair was a bit darker than she expected, but that doesn't really mean much because people's hair can darken as they get older. This is very common. She said that the ears, though, were distinct. They were right. Jonathan's ears had been a little bit big, and so were David's. One of the first things that she actually did when she saw David in person was touch his ears. This man also said that he had memories of childhood that seemed like they matched memories that Jonathan would have had. In August of that year, though, the family wanted to go through with a DNA test and see if this was actually Jon Jon grown up, and this is when David's story started falling apart. According to newspapers, a DNA test was conducted at this time, and it showed that David Bonnabel was not related to the Hagans family. After it was discovered he was not Jonathan, it seems he fled to Latin America. David stated that he was originally from Guadalajara, Mexico, and came to the United States as a teenager. He said that in 1981, he was being held by a woman against his will in a trailer in the Louisiana bayou, and that this woman was also holding another teenager captive, and this teenager's name was Jonathan. David said that this Jonathan he knew was being held by this woman and physically and sexually abused by her on the regular, and he wasn't even allowed to go to school. That this teenager he knew, Jonathan, was kept in this trailer, and he basically had no life outside of abuse. David said that while he lived at this trailer, he saw some very devastating things. David stated that this woman was a midwife and she helped deliver babies and then sold those babies on the black market. He also told authorities that one time he and Jonathan witnessed the murder of one of the girls and saw her, after she was killed, get stuffed into a meat grinder. When it comes to what allegedly happened to this Jonathan that David claimed he knew down in Louisiana, he said that he was killed during an attempt at escaping. David said, though, that he himself was, of course, able to successfully escape and that he made his way to Baton Rouge and then headed toward Buffalo with a woman that he met, and they got married at Shea's Buffalo Theater in 1982. David said that he wanted to find his own parents, so he stretched the truth a little, knowing that the story would get more coverage nationally if he pretended to be this missing boy that he claims that he might have met in Louisiana. David claimed that the whole thing did have a purpose, that he wanted to take down this woman in Louisiana and locate his parents, but the publicity got out of hand. Poor Margene Hagans, though, was so upset, rightfully so. Who would not be devastated as a mother to go through this? She and her husband, at one point at the very beginning, did believe that David Bonnabel could actually be Jon Jon. She said it was confusing, and at that point, they didn't know what to think or what to believe from anyone. Margene said that David was probably involved in some very bad things, but whether that actually involved her son, she didn't know. She just hoped that David Bonnabel never came back into their lives ever again. A relative of the family, Carol Boyette, stated that David may have come across Jonathan at some point in his life. They didn't know, that he must have gotten this story from somewhere, and they wanted to believe that he wasn't making up everything, if he was actually telling the truth and met a boy named Jonathan that he believed was Jon Jon Hagans down in Louisiana in the bayou, and he did go through all of this has never been proven. Most believe that David made up the entire thing to become adopted into a family and gain American citizenship. At the end of the day, though, the Hagans family was quite curious as to how David knew so much personal information about Jon Jon, things that were never released in the paper. Margene said that at the very beginning, David had everyone fooled, everyone in the family. David had information about her son being in a body cast when he was very young, which is true. He knew about the stairs in their home. He was able to describe the layout of the house. And he even talked about playing school with a brother and sister, which happened. How David knew all of this information is completely unknown, but it did make the Hagans family wonder if part of his story was actually true. No charges were ever filed against David Bonnabel, and Jonathan's mother recalled that at the time, the police told her, quote, "Breaking a heart is not against the law." And again, this case hit another dead end. It wouldn't be until the year of 2020 that this case saw a resurgence of public interest. This is when the Jacksonville Beach Police Department partnered with the Bringing the Lost Home Task Force, a task force dedicated to locating missing people. One of the members of this task force is the founder and CEO of Scent Evidence Canine, Paul Coley. Paul Coley is a former FBI canine operations specialist, and he helps raise awareness for missing children and how families can prepare, protect, and prevent something from happening to their young loved ones. In early 2020, Paul Coley sat down with Jonathan's brother Joel, and they talked about Jon Jon's case. This is when the task force started working alongside authorities and the Hagans family to see if they could find out anything else regarding Jon Jon's case. They wanted to advocate for Jon Jon and also raise awareness about how a child can go missing in a split second. Scent Evidence Canine, obviously you can tell by the name, trains scent dogs, and they actually named a 17-week-old bloodhound Jon Jon to commemorate the actual Jon Jon that went missing in 1968. Jon Jon the Bloodhound was welcomed to the Tallahassee Police Department Special Victims Unit, and the Hagans family was extremely touched by this heartfelt tribute. Real quick, I want to highlight a product that Scent Evidence Canine released years back, and it's one that I really do think a lot of people could benefit from, even if you don't ever end up using it. I hope that no one has to. It's something that would be really good to have. Scent Evidence Canine released the Rex Rescue Pup Pak, which is a stuffed animal scent dog that comes in a dog house with a little book written by Paul's daughter and also a scent preservation kit. This kit is used to collect your child's scent and preserve it so it can be handed over to authorities in case your child goes missing and scent dogs are brought in to help. Their goal was to create an easy and understandable way for parents and caregivers to talk to kids about child safety issues. Their child safety kit contains a specially treated scent storage jar, a sterile scent pad, a tamper-proof seal, a child ID kit with fingerprint and DNA collection material, and more. They have other products on their site as well, and if you do just want to buy the child safety kit without the stuffed animal or the book, that also is an option.
I thought it would be a very meaningful gift for my nieces and nephews because, how this has touched our family. We don't want it to ever happen to anyone. And, I wanted to make sure that I gave a gift to my nieces and nephews, so if ever it's needed, it's there and they'll have the best opportunity to give them the evidence they need, to bring them home if ever needed.
There's also a children's book in there called Rex the Rescue Pup. It explains Rex and him learning his gifts and talents. And at the end of the book, the child is allowed to state what their gifts and talents are. And that's when we were telling parents, discuss safety. You just empowered your child. They have special gifts and talents so they can use to keep themselves and others safe. So we're really hoping parents will use this to soften the subject, but prepare your child to keep them safe.
Absolutely.
Due to the fact that there is no evidence to point to Jon Jon actually being deceased, they are still searching for him, and his family members do have their DNA on multiple databases in case his DNA is ever uploaded onto one, whether that's because he is still alive and puts his DNA on one, maybe even one of his children or grandchildren eventually uploading theirs, or if he is a John Doe out there somewhere. Bottom line is, all these years later, they are still very much hopeful. Now, I've seen several people on forums ask why anyone is still posting about this case given its age. And the only thing that I have to say about that is that those people must not be very educated when it comes to the fact that so many people many years later who were kidnapped as children have been found. I've covered a few of those cases here on my channel where somebody as a grown adult will discover that they were actually a missing child and they will be reunited with their family decades and decades later. Yes, the landscape in Jacksonville has changed since 1968 and witnesses have passed on, but I think with modern technology, there is a chance they could discover what happened to little Jon Jon all those years ago, and I really, really hope that they do. Jonathan Edward Hagans, nicknamed Jon Jon, was 3 years old when he vanished from Jacksonville Beach on June 11th of 1968. He was 3 feet 2 inches tall and weighed roughly 35 pounds. He has blonde hair and blue eyes. He was wearing blue swim trunks with a red stripe. He had previously fractured his femur. On the screen is an age progression photo of him done in 2017 of what he would have possibly looked like at the age of 52. If he were alive today, he would be 60 years old. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Jonathan Hagans, you are urged to contact the Jacksonville Beach Police Department at 904-270-1661. I want to thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day to hear about Jon Jon's case. I am originally from Florida. I've said this before on my channel. I was born there and raised there until I was 13 years old. And so I feel a connection to cases out of Florida. I do feel like most of us feel more of a connection to cases that are from a place that we are very familiar with. Jon Jon's case is actually one that I only recently came across. I'm very surprised that I had never heard of it, and I want to thank the person who brought this case to my attention through a request to my request email. Like with any case that I discuss here on my channel, make sure to leave some kind words, some love down in the comments, because you never know who may come across this video. We are continuing No Trace November here on my channel, which is a series that I do every single year in November, where for the entirety of the month, I cover cases of strictly missing people. So if there are any disappearance cases that are 20 years or older, because I do stick to older cases, and you possibly want me to cover it here on my channel, make sure to send those requests over to gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com. I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day. Wherever you are, stay safe like always, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.